Hello again. Welcome to another lesson in Algebra 1. Today we are covering section 10.5, solve quadratic equations by completing the square method. So this is our first algebraic way of solving quadratic equations that can't be factored, that have a b value. So last time we worked on ones that the b was 0, so it was a special case, but this works for all quadratic equations, including ones where the b is 0. All right, so factor each. So there's some practice here. So we're thinking of two things that multiply to negative 18 and add to negative 3. Those are negative 6 and 3, and then you can make your box. So this is 9x squared minus 6x plus 3x minus 2. So in the top, there's a 3x that's the same in both, and that leaves behind 3x and minus 2, and in the bottom, there's only a 1 needed to multiply in to make it work. So 1 times 3x is this 3x, and 1 times negative 2 is that negative 2. So this factors into 3x plus 1 and 3x minus 2. All right, number 2, we have a leading coefficient of 1, so all we have to do is make this part. So 4 and 4, and the answers are 2. 2 times 2 is 4, and 2 plus 2 is 4. So this is the same thing twice. So this is actually a perfect square trinomial, m plus 2 squared. Remember, we can check for perfect square trinomials by square rooting the first term, square rooting the last term, and then timesing them together and doubling it. And if it makes the middle, ignoring the sign, then you know you have a perfect square. Okay. So this next one is also a perfect square. So the square root of this is m, square root of this is 3, and if I times those by 2, I get the middle term ignoring the sign. So this could be m minus 3 squared. Okay. But if you've forgotten, you can still make the chart, or the x here. So it's what are two things that multiply to 9 and add to negative 6, and those are negative 3 and negative 3. Okay. Our last one's also a perfect square trinomial. That's y and 5 times it by 2, and we get the middle ignoring the sign. So this is y minus 5 squared. Now if we made the x for this, that's two things that multiply to 25 and add to negative 10, which are negative 5 and negative 5. Notice in perfect square trinomials, the two sides of the x are always the same number. 2, 2, negative 3, negative 3, negative 5, negative 5. We'll use that to help us a little bit. Okay. All right, so let's look down here. Find the value of c that makes the expression below a perfect square, and then write the square of that binomial. So since this has a leading coefficient of 1, this is pretty easy. We're trying to think of what should c be if we have the same number twice and that numbers add up to 8. So this should be 4 and 4. And then 4 times 4 means that my c should be 16. So this would be x squared plus 8x plus 16. This is the c that makes it a perfect square. And then it factors into x plus 4 squared. 4's twice. Okay. Same thing happens to here. Since we have that leading coefficient of 1, it makes it really easy. We're just trying to think of what is the c value so that the two numbers would add up to negative 12. And the two numbers that are the same that add up to negative 12 are negative 6 and negative 6. So my c value should have been 36. 36 will make this a perfect square. And when I factored, I'm going to get m minus 6 squared. All right, and number 3. What is the c value that makes this one work? So let's see, we want to think of a c so that I can, what are the two numbers that multiply to c and add to 3? And they have to be the same numbers. So what are two numbers that will multiply to 3, or add to 3, I mean? Well, and they have to be the same, so that's going to be 1 1/2 and 1 1/2. That's half of 3. And then if we times that together, this is what a calculator is for. So 1.5 times 1.5 is going to make 2.25. Okay, so this is going to be b squared plus 3b plus 2.25. That's what our c value is. And then when I factor it, I'm going to get b plus 1.5 squared. Same thing twice. All right, we can do number 4. And number 4, we want to think of What is the C value so that the same number is used twice and that number adds up to -5? So if it has to be the same number twice and add up to -5, then each one of these needs to be -2.5, half of -5, okay? And then if you multiply -2.5 times itself, you're going to get C value to be 6.25. So here are my C values, okay? And we know we could rewrite this as x squared minus 5x plus 6.25, and then factored, this would equal x minus 2.5 squared. All right, so this is important because we're going to use this to help us solve any quadratic function, okay? So flip it over and let's see what I'm talking about. All right, so solve a quadratic function by completing the square method. The method of completing the square can be used to solve for any quadratic equation. It doesn't matter. To use this method, though, you must first write the quadratic equation in a special form. So we're going to write it as x squared plus bx equals d. So notice in this case, I have a 1x squared. So what we do is we take whatever the a is and we divide it to the other parts. Okay? So x squared plus bx equals d. When we move it to the other side, they'll just call it d there. So in our first example here, we have it already in this special form. So we have x squared plus 4x equals 10. So the b is 4 and the d is 10. Okay, and our a value is 1, which it has to be. All right, so here's our trick. We're going to put plus and a blank on each side. So this part right here. Okay. And inside the plus and blank, we're going to put in the number that would make the left side be a perfect square. So what is the C value so that the same numbers could add up to 4? So this is going to be 2 and 2, and that means our C value is 4. So we're going to add 4 to both sides, and what this will create is a perfect square binomial on this side. Okay, this is why it's called the completing the square method, because we added something to make it a perfect square. Okay, all right, so this is going to factor into x plus 2 squared, and then 10 plus 4 makes 14. And now we have a problem, like I told you in our last notes, that it was important. We have x plus 2 squared equals 14. We're going to square root both sides using that square root method. So this is x plus 2 equals the square root of 14, but don't forget the plus or minus in front there, because whenever you square root, you get 2 answers. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and move the plus 2 over to the other side, just like we did in last time's notes. And this is where we pull out our calculator, and we do the square root of 14 minus 2. So square root of 14 minus 2. And be careful in class with the graphing calculators. You need to end the parentheses on your square root. This will make about 1.74. And then we'll do negative the square root of 14 minus 2. And this will make negative 5.74. Okay, and both of these answers are rounded to the nearest hundredth. All right, so in our examples down below, we have the directions solve each using the completing the square method. Round your solutions to nearest hundredth if necessary. All right, so this was already in our form of x squared plus bx equals d. We have a 1x squared, the b is -2, and the constant term is already put to the other side of the equals. So we're going to make it a perfect square. 2x plus something equals 3 plus the same something. All right, in this case, let's see. Our C value is what we're looking for. We know that the two numbers should add up to -2. So this is going to be -1 and -1. And -1 times -1 will give me a C value of +1. So this is going to factor into my perfect square of x minus 1 squared, 2 of the same thing, and 3 plus 1 makes 4. All right, so then I'll solve it by square rooting both sides. So I'm going to get x minus 1, and I can drop the parentheses now, equals the square root of 4. So that's plus or minus 2. Okay, square root of 4 works out evenly. And then I'm going to add 1 to both sides. So plus or minus 2 plus 1. All right, so we've got to write our final answers. So our first answer comes from the +2. So 2 plus 1 makes 3. And our second answer comes from the -2. So -2 plus 1 makes -1. So we have x equal to 3 or x equal to -1. All right, and number 6, same thing. This is already in our form. Our a is 1, our b is 10, and the c's been moved over to the other side of the equals. So we're just going to try to find out what needs to go in the blank so that we could get a perfect square. All right, and in this case, let's see. What is the c value so that the two numbers add up to 10? Well, that means the two numbers are 5 and 5, and 5 times 5 makes 25 for my c value. All right, then I can factor this. This side's going to factor into m plus 5 squared. We have two 5s, so it's the same thing twice, equals -8 plus 25, and -8 plus 25 is 17. Okay, so I'm going to square root both sides. M plus 5 equals plus or minus the square root of 17. And then I'll move the 5 over. So plus or minus root 17 minus 5. And this is what a calculator for. So I'll do root 17 minus 5 for my first answer. This gives me about -0.88, or I do negative root 17 minus 5 for my second answer. So negative root 17 minus 5. This gives me negative 9.12. Okay? So here are my two answers. Number 7, it's almost set up the way I want. Okay, so in this case for number 7, we have 1t squared, so that's good. And then my b is -8, but what I need to do is just move the c over to the other side. So we'll say equals -15. Okay, and then we'll do our completing the square method. So minus 8t plus something equals -15 plus something. All right, so by now, hopefully you figured out what we've been doing when we were factoring these, and that is we just need to think of what's half of -8, which is -4, and then square that. So -4 times -4 will make 16. And the reason why that works is we just think of what's half of -8. These are the two numbers that will add up to -4, or -8, -4 plus -4. That's -8 divided by 2. And then I squared because I have to multiply the two numbers together. So this will give me 16. All right, so now I'm going to get t minus 4 squared equals 1. And then I'll square root both sides. So I get plus or minus 1, because 1 times 1 is 1, and -1 times -1 is 1. And then we'll add 4 to both sides. So this will be plus or minus 1 plus 4. 1 plus 4 is 5, and -1 plus 4 is 3. So our answers are 5 or 3. Okay. All right, number 8, we got a little more work to do here. So the first thing I'm going to do is divide everything by 3 so that I get 1x squared. So minus 8x plus 9 equals 0. And then I'll move the 9 over. So x squared minus 8x plus, and I'll leave myself a place for my completing the perfect square, equals -9 plus something. My something here is going to be same as last time, 16. It's half of -8 and then square it to make 16. So half of -8 is -4. -4 times -4 makes 16. Okay. Then we're going to do x minus 4 squared. And -9 plus 16 is 7. We're going to square root both sides to get x minus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 7. When we square root it, the parentheses go away here. Okay, and then move the 4 over. So plus 4 on the end. And then I type that on my calculator. So the square root of 7 plus 4 is 6.65. Or negative the square root of 7 plus 4 is 1.35. All right? Let's flip it over and see what's on page 2. All right, page 2 has just a follow-up. So solve each using the completing the square method. So just what we did. Round your answers to the nearest 100th if necessary. And remember, you must first get it into this form. Okay, x squared plus bx equals d. Okay, so neither one of those are in that form. And your first one, you have to divide everything by 2 and then move the constant term over. And your second one, you got a lot more work to do. You got to get this x squared over here. Okay, and then you got to move the 2 over there, and then you got to divide everything to make sure we have a 1x squared. Okay, so take some time and do these. Go back and watch the completing the square method if you need to. And your final answers are down here, but please do not come back with just final answers and no work. All right, I'll see you in class next time.